This video is about estimating percent, and the first thing I want to do is just a bit of review about exactly what percent is. So percent comes from Latin and it means by the hundred. So this part of the word means by the, and this part of the word means 100, which you may realize from taking French. Cent is 100 in French. So all a percent is it's a fraction that is expressed out of 100. And you might remember from fractions unit that you just did, a fraction that's out of 100 can also be really easily written as a decimal because it's hundredths, and we know how to write hundredths in decimal form. So I'm just going to pick an example. Let's imagine 27%. So 27% also means 27 out of 100, and it also means 27 hundredths, or 0.27. And if you wanted to go even further, this could be a ratio. It could be 27 per 100 that we might write like this. So 27% could be written in a lot of ways. So you could write it as a fraction, or as a decimal, or as a ratio, or you could keep it as a percent. So remember, one thing that's challenging with fractions is you can't always tell the size of a fraction just by looking at it. So for these two examples, 3/4 and 4/5, you don't really know right away which one is the larger fraction, unless you do some math to make equivalent fractions. And that's what a percent really is. It's just an equivalent fraction that we find very convenient to use in math. So I'm just going to turn these into something that looks a bit closer to a percent. I'm going to make an equivalent fraction that will be hundredths as the denominator. So for 3/4, I'd have to multiply top and bottom by 25. And that's going to give me 75 100ths. For 4/5, I'll have to multiply numerator and denominator by 20. And that's going to give me 80 100ths. And because these are 100ths, I can write it as a percent. So 75 100ths is the same as 75%. 80 100ths is the same as 80%. If I wanted, I could also write it easily as a decimal because it's hundredths. I could have written 75 hundredths or 80 hundredths. So this is why we use percents. They're really convenient. It's a really convenient way to compare amounts. And think about it this way. Let's pretend you got 27 out of 41 on a test. That's an okay mark, not a great mark, but doesn't tell you exactly how well you did. If you wanted to know exactly how well you did and be able to compare it to other tests you've done in the year, you might want to convert it to a percent, and we'll do that on the next slide. Okay, so let's imagine you got 27 out of 41 on a recent test, and you got 36 out of 50 on the test before that, and you want to know whether you're improving or not. So it's very difficult to compare these two test scores because the denominator, or the out of number, is different. So in order to compare them, a percent will be really helpful. So for the top number, I don't think an equivalent fraction is going to work for me here. I need to do some dividing. Remember, this line in a fraction also really means divided by. So in order to convert this to a percent, we're going to start by converting it to a decimal, and we're just going to divide numerator by the denominator. And this is a wonky one. I don't really want to do long division on it, so you can pull out a calculator and divide 27 by 41. We'll see what we get. Okay, this is my calculator answer, 0.658536583568356. So this is a really super long repeating decimal. I don't want to have to write out the whole thing, so I'm just going to round to the nearest thousandth. So we're going to write this down as 0.659. And because it's in a decimal form, I can really easily also write it in a percent. So in order to do that, we have to multiply by 100, which you can do on your calculator, or you might remember just a trick. When you're multiplying by 10, it moves the decimal place over 1 point to the right. If you're multiplying by 100, it'll move the decimal point over 2 places to the right. So if you don't have a calculator on you, you're multiplying by 100, that's a quicker way to do it. So 27 divided by 41 is 0.659, which can be written as 65.9%. Okay, so now we want to see if I'm improving or getting worse on my math test. So let's make a percent for the previous score, the one on the bottom. This one we can use equivalent fractions because it's a nice, easy, round denominator. 50 is very easy to turn into 100. We just have to multiply by 2. So I'm going to multiply top number by 2, bottom number by 2, and that gives me 72 out of 100. If I wanted to, I could divide 72 by 100. I don't really have to do that because this is hundredths. I know how to write it as a decimal, 0.72. And if I want to write that decimal as a percent, it would be 72%. So, not good. It looks like my math scores are going down. I went from 72% to 65.9%. Key thing here is these numbers are much, much easier to compare than these scores here. And that's why percent exists. It's so we can compare amounts. It's a way to standardize amounts because not everything is out of the same denominator. So you can standardize it by making everything out of 100. And the reason 100 is chosen is because it's really convenient. It can be very easily turned into a decimal. You could also use tenths, but hundredths just works a little bit better for being more exact. So that's why percent exists. Now, next slide is going to be about how to estimate percents.